All right, we're trying something different for the I-501CU, the podcast for nonprofit board members, starting today. And over the next 3 weeks, I guess a total of 4 weeks, we're going to introduce fellow consultants that have expertise in the nonprofit and the funder space. And hopefully it'll help you all board members understand what consultants can bring to the table, what expertise is available, and just to get a different perspective on things, because everybody we're interviewing has a vast experience in the nonprofit space. So I hope you enjoy this 4-part series. On this week's episode of I-501C, the podcast for nonprofit board members, I'm interviewing Randy Scheid, who is the founder of RGS Partners Consulting. Randy's got vast experience in the nonprofit space, started off in the Peace Corps, and then ultimately became Chief Strategy Officer for Quantum Foundation. And he'll discuss his trajectory in the nonprofit space and why he started moving out into the consulting space and the services he offers. So I hope you'll enjoy this interview with Randy. On this week's episode of I-501CU, the podcast for nonprofit board members, I'm interviewing a friend of mine, Randy Scheid. Randy is the founder of RGS Partners Consulting. I've known him for a number of years. His only downside is his undergraduate degree, which I'm sure we will get into here in a bit. But Randy, if you would please say hi to the audience and share a little bit about yourself and how you came to form your consulting firm.
Good morning, everybody. And then Michael, I won't rub it in about where I went to school. We can save that till later offline. But so pleasure to be here on this podcast, Michael. I've admired you and your work for quite some time. So it's definitely an honor to be here, and hopefully I can be of some help to your listeners and just provide maybe a different perspective that's of some value to them. My career is it's kind of a windy path. I've been working within the field of philanthropy, which is foundations and grant making, for about 15 years. Prior to that, just after college, I went into the Peace Corps and I was going to be a teacher and taught overseas for 2 years in the former Soviet Union. And that was fun. I had a lot of great experiences there. But one of the things I became exposed to when I was overseas was the work of what they called NGOs, which are nonprofit organizations, but non-governmental organizations overseas. So I worked with the Junior Achievement Affiliate in Latvia on a kind of a side project when I was there. And that sort of opened my eyes to the work that nonprofits do, how they function, what the different types of nonprofits are. So when I came back to the States, this is, I think, around 2000, I got into really kind of governmental work for about 5 years. I was responsible for management and oversight of public funds. And that exposed me to a lot of other nonprofits here in Palm Beach County, where I work and live, who are providing services to seniors to support them and provide them with a level of independence so they could stay in their home. That kind of connected into another opportunity working for a large healthcare system here in the county. That kind of narrowed my focus a little bit more, and specifically within the healthcare space. That in turn parlayed into an opportunity to work for a what's called a hospital conversion foundation, which is basically a health foundation that's formed from the sale of a nonprofit hospital here in Palm Beach County. And I was there for just over 11 years. And then I left at the beginning of 2023, looking at the calendar. So this will be my third year to start my own consulting company called RGS Partners Consulting. I primarily focus working with foundations and other philanthropic entities in the state of Florida. And I also have a couple nonprofit clients here locally.
Very good. Well, Randy, we appreciate that. And you've had quite, like you said, a circuitous, and a word I can't ever say, background and trajectory. And when you were at the Healthcare Foundation, just so people know, you were the Chief Strategy Officer. So you were responsible for deploying those resources and make an impact in the community. And I'm sure we'll weave that into the discussion. So, so you offer services. You've worked with a number of boards and board members. What are your observations of what makes an effective board member?
Yeah. So I think it's a really, obviously it's an important question. I was trying to sort of think about this from a, kind of some, personal experience of what I've had in the past with working with board members and seeing boards operate close up and from far away. And I think that, one of the most people are on boards for different reasons. When you go into a board, if you go into a boardroom or you go and speak with the board, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past, you ask them, why are you here? How'd you end up on this board? And, invariably some of them say, well, my former boss was on here and, he left. And then they said, well, you're going to be on that board now. And, it's whether or not someone understands the purpose sort of varies, a little bit. They're all passionate. They want to give, they want to provide their expertise, but, folks are on boards for different reasons. So I think in order to be kind of an effective board member, everybody brings their own expertise. If they're an accountant or an attorney, or they've made millions on Wall Street, whatever it is, they all bring that critical element of expertise. But I think one of the really helpful things that board members can do is try to be inquisitive and knowledgeable, but also have an openness to ideas and different views. You've got a lot of type A personalities around the table in board meetings and at the board table usually. Someone who sort of wants to learn from others, wants to hear from the perspective of others, could be a really valuable can be a really valuable board member. Respectful, obviously, and just someone who can see the skills and values that others bring to the equation, appreciate that, and then, try to build on that as well and see themselves as kind of one piece of a larger whole.
Yeah, I think that's very well articulated and stated. You don't need to, you're right, they are type A personalities. When they come in the boardroom, you got to remember, they're surrounded by other volunteers in type A's as well. And so it's really a collective effort. Now, so we're staying up high level on a board right now. How do you articulate the role of the board, the responsibility of the board? And then I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on your consulting practice.
Yeah. So, well, I got, if I'm laughing because I'm always thinking of Carrie Diaz, one of our colleagues and a former colleague of mine and someone I continue to work with. What does she say? Noses in, hands out, or noses in, fingers out, right? Yes. Like don't get involved in the details. Like that's the part of the staff and the CEO, right? But your nose should be in. You should smell if something's not going well. Smell if it is going well, right? But there's really kind of like the fiduciary and responsibilities and the governance responsibilities that board members have. Obviously, that should be something that folks are familiar with and kind of understand. But I think one of the other critical components of being a board member is sort of trying to take kind of the long view and thinking about the long-term sustainability of the organization beyond just your term. If you're there for let's say 3 years, or what are we going to do in this 6 months? It's really thinking about how can I help this organization over the next 3 to 5 years, and that's really simple things. Having conversations about leadership, about the level of partnerships that the organization has in the community, just to ensure that whenever your term does end as a board member, that you kind of leave it better than you found it, right? And just sort of trying to infuse that type of thought and approach into their activities as a board member, I think is helpful.
Oh, I like that. Now let's get into a little bit more detail with your expertise. And you wrote I don't know if you call it a white paper, but talking about succession planning not too long ago. You shared it with me and a number of others on LinkedIn, and I hope everybody follows you on LinkedIn. It was I really appreciated that. So
thank you.
What is the board's role in succession planning?
Well, again, I think it's, just don't be afraid to ask the question. Just, surface the issue. Understanding that, folks you don't have to bring this up as not a gotcha theme or like, hey, you need to figure out when you're leaving. It's really more so, again, to my prior point, how do we think about this organization's sustainability over, 3, 5, 10 years? And a big part of that is leadership, right, Michael? Like, especially at the executive level with the CEO and the folks, the CFO and maybe the COO, but really thinking about how do we weave that in there? How do we have that as maybe a regular point of conversation?
And there are some best practices you recommend to boards?
Yeah. So, a couple simple things, maybe have it as an agenda item every, you don't have to talk about it every month or every quarter, but maybe annually, just as a regularly occurring item that you have on your agenda. So it's not something that comes out of the blue. Everybody's prepared for it. That's that way it's kind of a regular part of the discussion. The other part of that is, really thinking of the succession planning, but just within the guise of leadership and leadership development. I think it's helpful if the board and the CEO can sort of partner to some degree on developing the internal leadership. And that could be with the other C-suites executives, or maybe it's someone just below that maybe reports up to the CEO, but give them an opportunity to come in the boardroom, give them an opportunity to present on an item, have some interaction with them as a staff person, and just give them some exposure to that executive level conversation, if you will, that happens in the boardroom to kind of help, bring up and progress some of the other leaders.
I think that is great advice. And it's a benefit to the board members. Board members, if they don't know the senior leadership, if they're not afforded the opportunity to really interact with them, they're sort of flying blind, and they welcome the opportunity to have somebody come present to them and get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think, maybe the other thing that I will say, and this is a point made by someone who transitioned out of their leadership position over the course of probably about 9 months and has since left. And one of the points that they made was, don't make any promises. If you're a CEO, and this was in the context of, don't give one single staff within your organization the impression that they're going to be the CEO and they're going to get that job after they leave. So just in terms of, again, building kind of a bench, if you will, and thinking about 3, 5, whatever it is, candidates, but really kind of avoiding a successor that's maybe you're going to be the one, because you just never know. Like, once that CEO transitions out, if the board has a committee that is in charge of the search or the selection, they may end up picking somebody else, and then you get into hurt feelings, and, well, they said I was going to be, and you just it's just not. That's just not the way it always works. So, but yeah, definitely avoid any direct promises.
Oh, very good advice there. So program implementation. Now, I love this. So when I work with boards like you do, and you're always working with the CEO and staff beforehand to prep for a board retreat or whatnot. And oftentimes they'll say, "Whoa, the board really likes to get into programming," and it's not from a positive perspective. So, what do you think the board's role is in discussing or considering new programs, and then in programs in general?
Well, I mean, from a starting point, that you should take a hard look and figure out, if you have a new program, if you have an opportunity to implement a new program, is how does it relate to your mission? Assuming it does, right? Does it relate to your mission of the organization? You want to have that match first and foremost, and then from there, though, what is the current capacity of the organization from an administrative standpoint, and what do the existing programs look like within the organization? Is everybody's head above water? Are we drowning in different things? Is this going to be an added layer of administrative nightmare that we have to overlay onto what we're currently doing? And then also thinking about, I'm kind of I don't know, it's, I guess, the turn of the year. I'm one of those guys who, like, every January, I just make this giant trip to Goodwill with like a load of stuff in my car, and I'm just like, if stuff comes in, stuff has to go out. So, like, it's like the same with programs. If you can add programs, great, but you should have staff, right, dedicated with time. Ideally, you want to have funding, but maybe there's an opportunity within that new programming conversation to say, is there an area where we could just kind of need to back off of, or is this program kind of sunsetted? Just having that part of the conversation too.
Well, I think that's important, because we all like to take on more and more and more, and oftentimes we don't jettison anything. So, like your Goodwill trip on an annual basis. And so maybe it's the board's role to say no, or to challenge the assumption if the CEO says, "Hey, we should do this," or vice versa, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Because, I think sometimes CEOs can just assume, like, well, this funder came and said, we've got this program, we really want you to do it. And they're just like, we want to do it. And, metrics within the nonprofit world are not hard and fast. So sometimes one of the metrics is, what's your financial growth from a revenue standpoint in terms of new donors? And if this means you get $100,000 new, 100,000 more every year for a program, is that really the right reason to do this program? So yeah, so just really thinking about that is important too.
So if I'm a board member of a nonprofit, how do I know a program is working or not?
I think you have to, obviously you got to ask the question, right? But I think before you get to the question, you have to create an environment that encourages learning. Evolution does not, welcomes open and honest discussion about progress and how programs are doing. You do not want to have an environment where folks are scared to raise their hand and say, hey, we got to make a change. This isn't working, right? Sort of cultivating that culture, if you will, first of, hey, we're all learning. We're all looking to improve where we can. So when we start to talk about evaluation, if something's not going well, that's fine. How are we going to adjust? What do we do to change that? Just thinking about it sort of more kind of from that mindset. And also, Michael, like, again, this isn't like a, let's do this, it should be kind of ongoing, always asking, what's our impact with this program? How do we know what are our metrics? Are those still feel good? Are they workable? Just kind of a consistent sort of check-in on that is important. So it's sort of a theme, kind of a theme within the culture.
So let's talk about board evaluation. Program evaluation, whether or not your granting is working. So we're talking now from a funder perspective, Randy, and I know you do evaluations of grant making. Everybody thinks it's easy, it's fun, just give away the money. But there is a strategy behind it. And then you want to know, is it working? So how does a funder determine whether or not they should do an evaluation? How do you even go about it? What is it? Can you just talk about evaluations?
So you can evaluate. So there's different think of them as layers, if you will, or levels of evaluation. There's an evaluation you conduct of a certain intervention or a certain program. Let's say something simple, Meals on Wheels. We're delivering meals to homebound seniors. You can evaluate that program itself. That's a programmatic evaluation. You can evaluate the work of the foundation providing support to that nonprofit that's doing that work. So then you would be you would be evaluating the foundation itself, and then you would also kind of a higher level, a broader perspective, evaluating whether or not that program fits in with the mission and vision of the foundation itself. So kind of different levels. And the thing that I had said before was just in terms of when to do an evaluation. You should be evaluating something probably at any time and sort of asking yourself the questions of, is this working? Is there something we need to change? Formal evaluations, probably like maybe every 2 to 3 years, especially. And when I say formal, maybe somebody with an objective outside opinion and perspective, not like a staff member per se, that can come in and sort of look at what you're doing. So yeah, there's some different ways to do it, and different timing. But again, it's also sort of thinking about like just the question itself of trying to use evaluation as a kind of a generative framework to improve what you're doing, and not so much like, we're going to get you on something, right? Like we're not, it's not so much that, we're trying to evolve, we're trying to learn, we're trying to set everybody up for future success.
Interesting. So you do it, you don't have a staffer do it because they're too close to it. You want an objective viewpoint who somebody that can even offer ways to do it better. Is that a simple way to state it?
They could. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Based on their perspective, but also the field as well, right? The best practices in the field, and sort of thinking about how you can apply those to your operation specifically.
So when you do an evaluation, and I'm thinking as a board member, and typically evaluations are done on the funder side, right? A funder will engage it and say, hey, is my grant making, how effective is it? And then you'll interview the grant recipients, the nonprofit agencies receiving the funding. And you'll determine from that type of analysis.
Well, and you can also, another thing that you do as well is you interview the staff of the foundation, ask them, how do you think it's working? Because if they say it's great, no problem, and then you go to the nonprofit and they're like, well, we got a couple challenges, right? There could be a disconnect. So you want to make sure there's a connect there, there's a connection there first. and thinking about, sort of, what that looks like.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. So now looking into 2025, RGS Partners Consulting, where are you lining yourself up? What's your area of interest? And I know you do a number of things, and we all consultants like to say, "Oh, I can do a little bit of everything." But I know there's areas of interest and focus. So what is it going to be for you this year?
I think, quite simply, strategy within the strategic planning, Michael, the leadership part comes up, as you know. I think, you can either lead with leadership and it's going to get you to strategy, like one way or the other. If you're having a strategic conversation with somebody, leadership and culture are going to come through in that conversation, right? It's the saying, I forgot who it was, what is it? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And if you're going to do a strategic plan, but you don't look at the culture, then you're selling folks short. So those two things. And then I've also, just continue to do, and this is something I did in my former role, but foundations often use me as a leader to sustain networks and groups and collaboratives that they've set up over the years. So I've continued to do that with a couple of clients of mine. I'll be the person that convenes a group. I'll lead them sort of from a leadership perspective, just keeping them on track with the conversations, trying to help them drive towards a common theme. Not necessarily being the expert in the room, but just sort of being the one that kind of corrals them so they're continually making progress in their work.
Very good. And I know you do a great job because I've heard people give me feedback on you. I've referred you. We shared some clients. I really do appreciate the work that you do, Randy, because you bring a great perspective to things, and you're very tempered, and you've got a nice approach to things. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to find you? How can they reach out to Randy?
Yeah, so I got the website, randyschheid.com, rgspartners.com. They're both one and the same. They'll take you to the same place. LinkedIn's probably the best place. Randy Scheid. I think it's MPA is the way that I have it on there. You can go to LinkedIn. You can email me, rgs.partners@outlook.com. It's funny, Michael, I've been in Florida for a while. I think at this point, like everybody, it seems like people usually end up finding me somehow, some way. It's very rare I get like an email notice through my website, like so-and-so emailed you. Probably the same for you. It's like somebody's going to know how to get in touch with Michael Corley some way, somehow, right? So yeah,
that's good.
It's one good thing about being around for a while, I guess.
Yeah, I guess with our gray hair. Well, you don't have any gray hair, but our tenure.
Cut it off before the interviews.
Smart move. I can't do that, or I wouldn't have hair. So, and for the listeners, Scheid is spelled Scheid.
Right.
And certainly, I'm connected to it on LinkedIn, so you can look at my stuff. And Randy's connected. So, Randy, I really appreciate this. Appreciate your wisdom and sharing with us and helping strengthen boards in our community and to our listeners.
Likewise. Appreciate you, Michael. Thank you for all you do. And I'm just honored to be here, and hopefully this is helpful to your listeners today.
Well, I'm sure it is. I should probably come clean. So Randy did go to the Ohio State University. I understand you have to say it that way.
Yeah.
Who kicked the butt out of my Tennessee Volunteers a few weeks ago, and they are riding high, working their way towards a national championship. So best of luck to your alma mater.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Reed, nice meeting you as well, okay?
All right, it's time for Recapping with Reed, our conversation with Randy Scheid. Reed, what were your takeaways?
My first takeaway is about what makes an effective board member. And I really liked how Randy said it's someone that sees themselves as one piece of a larger whole, one piece of the whole puzzle.
Yeah, and mic drop there. Very good. Number 2.
The responsibility of the board is to ultimately think about the long-term sustainability of the organization. That means succession planning, funding, all things like that. They should be thinking about the long-term sustainability of the organization.
Yeah, and something about eyes in, fingers out that his partner, Kerry Diaz, came up with, who was interviewed on this podcast a number of months ago. And number 3, Reed.
Kind of sticking along that same line, when it comes to succession planning, you don't have to think about it every single board meeting, but he suggests having succession planning as a topic on your board agenda, at least annually, to make it just part of the process so it's not a surprise. It doesn't come out of the blue. People have time to think about it and prepare for that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And put it on your board calendar once a year, if nothing else, to make sure that you're talking about. So there you go. Well, there it is, Recapping with Reed. his 3 observations on our conversation with Randy Scheid. And we will I-501 see you next week.